It's hard to believe, but 13 years ago today, the tragic events of September the 11th, 2001 happened. Man, 13 years now. That time has flown by. It almost seems like a fantasy world because we're so far removed from it now. And as I've been looking on social media today, people have been tweeting about their memories and thoughts and their remembrances of that day. And one common thread has been the hashtag never forget. I know I most certainly, as long as I live, will never forget what happened that day. I will never forget the reaction of the country in the aftermath of what happened. And I'll never forget what it eventually led to our country becoming. And as a result, I think it's very important that all of us as American citizens and all of us as a people in this world never forget. Never forget 3,000 people lost their lives on that very tragic day. Never forget the patriotism and love of country demonstrated in the aftermath of that tragic event by pretty much all American citizens. Never forget the common bond that we all shared as Americans. There were no red states, there were no blue states. We were, more than perhaps any other time in our country's history, the United States. Never forget how fear can be used as the ultimate weapon of terror, and not by foreign enemies, but those that are domestic. Never forget in the aftermath of September 11th how it became almost un-American to question anything. Never forget how willing so many of you were to go to war at that time. Never forget the Bush administration lied and thousands of American soldiers died. Never forget how support the troops became a new form of pro-war propaganda used as a shield to protect against anyone and anybody questioning anything about the war on terror. Never forget how in our anger and our outrage to get the evildoers, we sent troops to fight and die without the proper equipment and resources they need to come back home safely. Never forget how support the troops did become a mantra, but not a mantra to actually support the troops, as we failed to take care of them once they did come home from these godforsaken places. Never forget how 13 years later, and we still have yet to have a real true investigation of what led up to and what actually happened on September the 11th, 2001. Never forget the 9/11 Commission was never designed to investigate anything, and nor did they. All they were there to do was to advance the official narrative, the story that had been pounded down your throats for years by your politicians and by your state-run, corporate-owned media. Never forget the bravery of those first responders at Ground Zero. Never forget how just a few short years ago, our politicians thought it was more important to extend tax cuts to the wealthy than provide the care and support that those brave first responders needed via the Zadroga bill. Never forget foreign terrorists didn't win that day. The industrial military complex did. Never forget the response to that day accelerated our country's path towards bankruptcy. Never forget that you were duped in 2001 and you're still being duped to this day. Never forget those willing to sacrifice liberty for security will lose both and deserve neither. Never forget that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and those fears being used against us. Never forget that someday the real truth will finally be revealed. Ultimately, it's critically and vitally important that we never forget, because those that don't learn from their history are doomed to repeat it. Never forget.